Is it true only a handful of teams can actually win a national championship? Well, the creator of the blue chip ratio comes on to explain his metric and how all the changes in college football could one day break it. Plus, 7-on-7 tournaments are in full swing as we start to get familiar with the 2025 class. Our director of scouting takes you through the top talent in Miami over the weekend. And it's Free Game Monday. Our resident former All-SEC and NFL talent gives us the how-tos and the what-not-to-dos on an unofficial visit. All that and more as the college football recruiting show starts right now. Alongside Blair and Gulo, I'm Emily Proud. Submit your questions in the chat. We will get to some of those at the end of today's show. As always, the only way that you can see the chat is by subscribing to the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. One more request. Please like this video so we know that you're watching. You know the drill. You hit the like button and we're going to go ahead and hit those headlines. You watched it go down right here on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. Often referred to as #CommitHQ. That's where the number 31 player in the nation, offensive tackle Carter Lowe, committing to Ohio State. Blair, what are the Buckeyes getting in the number 4 player at his position?
A big, talented prospect. Tally up some more momentum for Coach Ryan Day as Ohio State continues its recruiting renaissance. Carter Lowe adds size and length to a class that it keeps climbing in the 2025 rankings.
As if they could need any more momentum, they've got it. Well, over 3 months after it was announced Brian Ferentz would not return as the Iowa offensive coordinator next season, the Hawkeyes have their man. Tim Lester taking over a unit that finished last in total offense this fall. He was the head coach at Western Michigan, most recently a senior analyst with the Packers. But Blair, how will this hire change, if at all, the way Iowa recruits offensive skill players?
At the very least, Emily, the Hawkeyes will have something new to sell to offensive recruits. They have ranked 10th or worse in the Big Ten in scoring offense each of the last 3 seasons. Tim Lester had a top 10 scoring offense in 2020 and a top 35 offense in 2021. So I'd expect them to be able to get some traction with prospects this spring.
All right, a top 30 player, wide receiver Jamie French. He's got 2 F's in his name and now 3 finalists. He told 24/7 Sports that it will come down to Miami, Florida State, and Ohio State for his services. Blair, those schools are fighting for what kind of talent?
Magnifique. Now, don't quote me on that, Emily, but I think that's French for magnificent. French can do it all. He's a great route runner, fluid in the open field, dangerous with possession, strong hands, and a wide catch radius. Magnifique.
We had way too much fun with his last name, and the cycle is just beginning, so stay tuned for more puns. Happening over the weekend, the Battle Miami 7-on-7. That is where some of the top prospects in the nation competed against each other in the Sunshine State, and so that's where we are headed next on this very show. Let's welcome in 24/7 Sports Director of Scouting, Andrew Ivins. Andrew, before we get into the actual talent and what you saw this weekend, what's the benefit for these prospects to compete in this kind of event?
It's really a showcase, and we had 50 teams from around the country. It was 16 hours of action, 8 Saturday, 8 Sunday. This is an opportunity for some of the prospects in the class of 2025 and the class of 2026 to be seen. And I know we got National Signing Day for the 2024 cycle, less than a week away. But for us, it was an opportunity to study these guys. I think by my count, 43 of the top 247 recruits we have in 2025 participated. So we like to see it. I mean, it's not padded football, but you can learn a lot. You can size up different body types. And it was a fun 2 days down there in sunny Fort Lauderdale.
It's a great exposure for not only the evaluators, but obviously for the prospects, Andrew, because we get to see some stuff that maybe we didn't see on film, or maybe we were able to stack up what we did see on film to try to kind of measure up some of these prospects. It's always a fun environment to see competitiveness and maybe how players react to off plays or negative plays. And that's something that we just don't see in highlight films because we only see the good plays in the fall. Now, a player that made a ton of good plays is usually the alpha dog of this event. And Andrew, who was that for this weekend for 24/7 Sports down at Battle Miami?
Dakorian Moore, one of our early 5-stars for the 2025 cycle, the LSU wide receiver commit. I'll be honest, I didn't know he was going to be there this weekend. On Saturday, saw a little bit of him. And then on Sunday, he took over. I mean, this is a guy that reminds me a little bit of Jalen Waddle playing 7-on-7, kind of similar size, can get off the press coverage. And what's unique about Dakorian Moore, I mean, this is two-hand touch football. He's one of the few guys there that can create big gains after the catch. I mean, there's yards after the catch when there's no tackling. It's a bit wild. Dakorian also played a little bit of defensive back. I think if he was just a safety this weekend, he still would have had a spot on the top performers list. He was that awesome. And remember, Ryan Williams reclassified. He left 2025 to go to 2024. Dakorian Moore, our #1 ranked wide receiver, averaged over 20 yards per catch as a junior at Duncanville, won a state title there. He looks like the real deal.
All right, he's not the only one that stood out. You have put together a top 10 list of the best performers this weekend, and you can check out that full list at 247sports.com. But we're going to let you highlight a couple. First, though, I have to ask about what you wrote about wide receiver Calvin Russell. You said to not be surprised if he creates a similar type of madness to the hype we saw surrounding Jeremiah Smith. Please explain.
All right, well, Jeremiah Smith, right, finishes the #1 ranked player in the 2024 cycle. If you go back to that initial top 100, he was 38 for us. Calvin Russell in a similar range, and they are similar in a variety of different ways, both multi-sport athletes. Jeremiah Smith was a guy that did the hurdles. Calvin Russell is a really talented basketball player. He could actually play college basketball, has multiple offers, including one from the Final Four darling FAU, but he's probably going to be a football guy. 6'4", elite body control. He caught everything, and I thought he was the best 2026 on hand over the weekend. Earned an invitation to the All-American Bowl. And what's unique about Calvin Russell is he had to play some quarterback as a as a sophomore there at Miami Northwestern High School. So it's a difficult evaluation, but you see him running around, getting out of trouble. He's really, really good. Now, the other big frame pass catcher I want to highlight is a guy that Blair is super familiar with. That's Derek Meadows out of Bishop Gorman High School. This is a kid that we put into the top 247. He had just 9 catches as a sophomore, doubled the production as a junior, but he was still playing second fiddle to Elijah Lofton, Michael Capana. He was an instant eye catcher Saturday. I mean, this is a state champ in the 300-meter hurdles, also runs the relays. He is 6'4", and you'll see the catch of the tournament right there, getting his leg in bounds. He's got a few offers. Tom Loy from 24/7 Sports fired in a crystal ball pick in favor of Notre Dame. I'm just surprised the SEC hasn't come calling for Derek Meadows. I think he's the real deal. I mean, you want these big guys that can cut and create separation, and then more importantly, pluck the football out of the air. Derek Meadows can do that. He checks off box after box. And then 2 defensive backs, DJ Pickett, one of our top-ranked corners in the 2025 cycle. I don't know what he is. Is he a corner? Is he a safety? Is he a wide receiver? Clemson's apparently telling him he can play on both sides of the ball. DJ Pickett's listed at 6'2". It's a rare case where this kid might actually be taller. I think he might be 6'4". Didn't see a ton of footballs come his way Saturday or Sunday, but made plays on offense. He's a rare body type. I think you take him and figure it out. And then kind of the same thing with Terrian Grant. I mean, when's the last time you saw a top performers list with Purdue up there? But Terrian Grant, new age cornerback, 6'3". He's got verified track speed. I thought he was awesome in man coverage, really sticky. That's a great get for the Boilermakers down in Tennessee.
Plenty of potential targets there for the Andrew Ivins Freaks list, which I know you start to draw up right now, Andrew, heading into the spring. The quarterbacks are obviously one of the big highlights of a passing tournament. You wouldn't have a successful tournament, 50-plus teams, without some high-profile quarterbacks. Who were some of the top QBs in attendance, Andrew?
Got to start at the top. Luke Nickel, the Miami commit, he led Cam Newton's team to a championship. Cam Newton, the Heisman Trophy winner, former NFL quarterback. He has a team. In the past, we've seen Dante Moore play for it. We've seen Jaden Davis play for it. And now it's Luke Nickel that's the guy under center getting the plays from Cam Newton. I thought he made some big-time throws at big-time moments consistently. You know, there might not be one singular elite trait with Luke Nickel, but he's really good at reading the entire entire field, going through his progressions, and then being on time. I also thought it was notable in this tournament they can blitz a little bit. He hit his hot read when he needed to. This is a kid that started off a little slow to his junior season, ended up leading Milton High School to a state title in Georgia's highest classification. So Luke Nickel, great weekend for him. I completely get the take from Mario Cristobal and the Hurricanes. They try to figure out that quarterback room. They got the transfers coming in, but they need a high school arm. Luke Nickel looks to be the guy. Husan Longstreet, another arm I want to talk about. Our top unranked quarterback in the 2025 cycle. He only played a few games, but man, he is polarizing. He has a cannon. I thought he had the best arm in terms of velocity, just how the ball jumped out of his hands. Twitchy kid, he's only 6'1", 185 pounds, but he is rocked up, and a guy that ran for 5 touchdowns in a game this season with some late heroics. So Husan Longstreet, I think he's a name to certainly know at some point down the line, as these quarterback dominoes fall. All right, what blue blood is going to pivot over to Husan Longstreet? Because, man, again, that arm talent, it's rare to see. How about SMU commit Keon Russell? I was a big fan of this guy. I didn't know much about him. He was the trigger man for Dakorian Moore. Won back-to-back state titles there at Duncanville High School, completing over 70% of his passes. Here in this 7-on-7 setting, the ball hardly touched the ground. I mentioned teams could blitz every now and then. Russell, he spun out of some trouble and dropped some absolute dimes on the run. He's a loose athlete. He can create with his legs. You put on the tape, you see that. But I was impressed with his ability just to distribute the football. You think about Rhett Lashley there at SMU, what they want to do on offense. They're moving into the ACC. I love that fit. And then finally, got to give a shout out to Texas quarterback commit KJ Lacey. Wasn't expected to be at the tournament. Shows up and down Saturday. Sunday, he came alive when his team needed him to. I mean, he had one of the better deep balls of anyone there. Multiple 40-yard touchdown passes. And I just love KJ Lacey, how cool and calm he is in this setting. On Sunday, it gets ramped up. There's a lot of trash talking. He's a guy that, has it between the ears. So I thought it was a good tournament as well for KJ Lacey. He's headed to play for Steve Sarkisian there in Austin.
I love it. Andrew, no pads, but still plenty to learn. Thank you for teaching all of us. You can check out more of his work, of course, on what should be everybody's favorite podcast here at 24/7 Sports. It's the Football Recruiting Podcast with Andrew Ivins and Cooper Patagna. Something tells me they will discuss more of Andrew's everything that he learned. His whole notebook will be unloaded. New episodes drop Tuesday and Wednesday wherever you get your podcasts. You can also watch live on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel at 5 Eastern. What do the last 2 teams to stand on the mountaintop of college football have in common? Top talent. And it's not just those 2. There's a trend among champions that our friend Bud Elliott has dubbed the blue chip ratio, a metric that measures, well, how about we just let him explain? So let's welcome in Bud Elliott of the Cover 3 podcast. And we're going to start with that. I'm going to keep the question simple here. What is the blue chip ratio?
Hey, y'all. Yeah, so the blue chip ratio is just kind of a quick and dirty method to figure out who has done a baseline level of recruiting that could, if everybody stays healthy and the coaching's good and the development's good, allow you to win a national title. And to sum it up, it's pretty clean. Did you sign more than 4 and 5 stars over the last 4 years than 2 and 3 stars? And everybody since the advent of the BCS has done so. And just I take a look at it. Okay, they're over 50%. They're out. Sorry, most likely not going to happen. And we've had a couple close calls. Maybe somebody might bust it. Ultimately, the Cinderella, the slipper, just gets smashed on that final Monday night. So, yeah, Michigan, another blue chip ratio national champion.
So, Bud, what you're saying is that stars matter. That's the essential argument. The common thought, though, is that programs like Alabama and Georgia and Ohio State are really the only ones involved in the national championship chase because of how they recruit. But obviously, Michigan bucked that trend this past year. How does the blue chip ratio disagree with that idea?
Yeah, so I really look at it as just sort of a minimum level of talent that you need to compete. The idea that we have these super teams and that, it's only Michigan, it's only Ohio State, it's only Alabama, it's only Georgia. I'm not crazy enough to think that having more talent is a bad thing, but I really do believe once you have a certain kind of minimum threshold of talent, from there, the rest of it mostly comes down to a quarterback, coaching, development, culture, staying healthy. All those things matter a lot as well. Once you have a certain minimum level of talent, to kind of go back to SAT prep, this is sort of like a necessary but not sufficient condition. Just because you have it doesn't mean you win it, but if you don't have it, you almost certainly won't win it.
Now, Bud, though, there's different ways to acquire talent now. It's not just through recruiting. So how do you factor in the transfer portal to the blue chip ratio?
So just to keep it consistent over the last 15 years, my official blue chip ratio doesn't use the transfer portal because I'm still trying to figure out, okay, how do these grades that we put on at 24/7 Sports, how do they translate to the draft, and what sort of adjustment, what kind of modifier do I need to use to fold it in? But this year I did put out one that had the transfer ratings folded in, which I thought was interesting. And ultimately, guys, it doesn't really change all that much because what we're finding is that your teams that are winning the national title, for the most part, are still made up of really elite high school recruits who stayed healthy and they developed and they hit well. And they're patching some holes through the transfer portal, which I think is probably the best formula. But we'll see. Like maybe an Ole Miss can pop me this year and we'll bust the blue chip ratio. That's probably the number one team to watch there.
But there's so many factors. We just touched on the transfer portal specifically. Is there a way to include that into a metric to potentially predict who has realistic aspirations to win a national championship?
I think if you wanted to make it even more difficult to follow, but also potentially a little bit more accurate, you could probably play with some kind of linear weightings, right? And say, okay, this team has this much talent, this much experience, and also like this amount of age. A lot of these teams that are winning the national title, especially in the era of the COVID super seniors, where we have some of these guys, Washington didn't win it, but they did make it to the title game. They had 6 guys on their roster who were 6th-year players. So if you want to refine it even more, and maybe I'll do that this year, hey, here's the minimum list, here's the teams that I actually think can win it, I'll probably play around with some experience weighting on there.
You don't have to understand it. I mean, if you have been paying attention to the discourse today in the football world, you don't necessarily have to understand the numbers to have a strong take on it. But we will be keeping an eye out for that. Meanwhile, we're expanding to a 12-team playoff this year, and the talk is all about how this is going to give more teams a shot at the title. But as it pertains to this ratio, what does the expanded playoff do to the likelihood that we see a team bust it?
So I think it probably decreases the odds of a true Cinderella actually busting it, because in order to do so, you're probably going to have to win 3 games as opposed to just 2 over teams that have more talent than you do. It allows more teams to get into the dance, but I'm not necessarily sure that it increases the odds of a Cinderella to wear the crown at the end of the dance. And that's kind of a key differentiating factor there. In fact, if you had just taken the playoff ratings and going back over time, 35 more teams would have had a team make the playoff over the last decade or so, which, hey, like that provides hope. We have all these fan bases that want some hope and give them some hope. And the 4-team playoff was pretty exclusionary in that regard. But in terms of actually winning it all, I'm skeptical that it's actually going to increase your chances to win the whole thing.
But more teams will think that they can, and that makes for good television, right, Bud?
Hey, we sell hope. I mean, what are recruiting rankings, right? Like, gives you something to dream on. You might have gone 4-8 this year, but you signed the number 8 class. Like, you can dream on that. This is hope.
Exactly. That's what this is all about. Hope. Bud, we hope that you'll be back sometime, but thank you for being here today. You can check out more of his work, of course, on the Cover 3 podcast with Chip Patterson, Tom Fornelli, and Danny Cannell. They have been, and they will be, talking college football long after the season is over, so check it out wherever you listen to podcasts. You know what day it is. It is Free Game Monday, meaning anything goes. I ask, and Smoke Dixon answers your burning questions. We hope that you learned something during these segments. So let's talk about some unofficial visits here. Smoke Dixon, here in studio with me. I have to point to him, and I have to give the resume. All SEC cornerback, played in the NFL, and now he's blessed us with his presence here as a national college football analyst. So just to let you know that he's qualified to be giving us this great advice. And let's start with some of those unofficial visits.
Man, I appreciate that great introduction, but let's get straight to it.
Let's do it, because we're going to talk about the why and the how and all of these things, but let's start with the what. What is the difference between an unofficial and an official visit?
It all comes down to the money. Unofficial visits, you're paying for it all. The recruit's family is handling from door to door. On an official visit, the university or college is paying for it from door to door. So it's all about financing. Who's paying for this trip? So whoever's paying for the trip's in charge of that trip and what your information you're getting out of it.
That's the key, is the information that you're getting out of it. What are some common mistakes that players make when they go on these unofficial visits?
Well, the first thing is that who's paying for it? Like, meals aren't provided, your transportation not provided, lodging's not provided. And also not having the proper information in terms of questions that you want to ask on those visits, right? Because when you get on there, it's a question answering, an information gathering industry that we're in. When you're on an unofficial visit, it's your show. So you're in control of it and what you want to see, where you want to go, and how you want the things to go towards the entire day.
Yeah, so a lot of times these prospects come in, they want to take the photos, they want to say they were on this visit, but there's so much to gain from it. So what should the goal of these visits be for players?
Well, the first thing that you want to get done on this visit is to answer get the questions answered that you want, and it's an information gathering that you want to get out of this. It's just not to go on, like you just said, to take the picture and say, hey, listen, I was at this school, I was at school, I'm taking a picture with the head coach. No, you're there to gather information to help clarify and bring more clarity to your decision that you're going to make in a few weeks.
Yeah, that's easier said than done, though. You can say, yeah, we need to answer all of these questions because you want to figure out all of these things, check all these boxes, but what should be on a checklist for questions that prospects absolutely need to get answered?
The first episode that we had in the show was talking about, is this a committable offer? So you want to have a meeting with the head coach to get the firm understanding of, is this a committable offer? That's question number one that you want checked. Check that one. Yes or no. If it's a no, get up and walk out.
Can you remind people what goes into that process? Because I think that people that maybe didn't watch that earlier episode are saying, what is an uncommittable offer? How do you guarantee that offer you can take?
Well, the way that you can guarantee it is by asking the head coach. If today is the day that I feel like committing to your college, can I get that done? If the head coach says yes, that's a committable offer. If the head coach says, well, you got to come back and run a 40 for me, or you got to get your test scores up, or you got to get past these classes, or you're just on a short list. All those other than just saying yes, that's not a committable offer.
Okay.
Move on. Find somewhere else. Go shopping where somebody wants to purchase what you're selling.
Okay, so once you get that very important question answered, what's next?
Now we can get on to step two. We're now trying to find out the culture of this team. Like, everybody talks about this word culture, but they don't understand what it means. That means, what direction is your program going within the next 3 to 5 years, because that's where I'm going to be here. And you ask those questions to current teammates, players on that team, and they should give you the same answer that the primary recruiting coach is giving you and the head coach is giving you. If there's any difference in that, it's misunderstanding and communication. You might want to get out that building. Another checklist you should go through is academic support center. Everyone says, hey, we have a study hall, but what are requirements for the study hall? Is it a need-based study hall? Meaning, if I am struggling in a particular subject, is that where I'm going to get help on? Or am I going to just come in, drop off all my books and say, I'm here at study hall, check me in? No. If I have an exam or paper that needs to be written, that's what we're working on this week. Next thing you want to look at is strength and conditioning. How am I getting stronger? And what am I doing to get myself better from day one? If I come in at 175, how am I going to get to 195 within a 3-year process? Give me how that works. Then you go into nutrition. If I'm lifting this much, what type of fuel am I getting my body to put forth, the effort that I need to get into? Then you need to check into the training room. You get to build, you get to eat. Now how am I going to mend and take care of myself? Rehab and prehab is an important part. Then you get into the player engagement and player development. How are you going to help me in my time of need? When I need help when I first show up on this campus, when I need help in internships, if I get in any type of trouble, how am I going to get out? You're the one that I'm going to lean on for advice. Then you get into the mental health portion of it and mental coaching and performance coach. Make sure they have that, because right now we understand that there's a lot of mental health issues that's going on in our current athletes. And if we're not taking a keen look on what's going on, that's when we find a lot of trouble. During my time, that was it's taboo to even talk about that. But now that's an open subject, and most places should have that going on at their schools.
So important to get all of those questions answered. One thing that you said, though, that really sticks out to me is don't just ask this to the staff members and to the coaches, ask players. I will also add, ask multiple players if you can, because you might get one answer from somebody who's starting and playing a lot of minutes, and you're going to get a completely different answer from somebody who's on the bench and unhappy with their situation. So ask as many questions as possible. But that tough conversation that you have is definitely going to be with the head coach and having those conversations of substance. How do you nail that conversation with a head coach and some important staff members that you meet?
Well, you want to break down your conversation with the entire staff as having 3 layers. Because if you just have one layer of just talking to the guy that's recruiting, you really don't know everybody else. So you have a primary recruiter, your secondary recruiter, and I always say you want a third-party validation. Somebody that can speak on behalf of whatever those 2 people are talking about to give you confirmation on what's going to happen. And you get substance out of your conversation by building. Every single conversation shouldn't be, hey, buddy, you're doing great. You're the best. And when you get here, you're going to be awesome. No, your job as a coach or an adult in that building is to help me get past that bridge from boyhood to manhood. And you should be preaching and you give me life lessons daily. And from our conversations, if we can't pick up from what we did last week or what we spoke about last week, and you just sending me a text, or you're not asking about, hey, how did that test go last week? That you said you were struggling in math. Now there's substance to our conversation. This is not a transaction, because you're really into what I have going on and you remember the conversation that we have going on. And then as a player, what you want to do is start a little test. Every now and then, take some notes.
Yeah.
Then ask that person, you remember when you told me about your dog that you had in 8th grade? And if they take about 5 minutes and try to give you some fluff answer, yeah, they're just recruiting you, but they're not building that true relationship.
Got to find that substance. I love it. Always great advice when we have our Free Game Mondays with Smoke Dixon. Thank you so much for being here, and get ready, because you're going to see a whole lot of him next week for National Signing Day. We're also celebrating National Signing Week, so be ready to see content drop every day next week. But the biggie, live show, 3 hours, Wednesday, February 7th. Let's welcome back Blair Angulo, who never really goes anywhere, but I feel the need to welcome him back when I get to see him because we have some viewer questions. It's been a while since we've done these. So let's ask this first one from Tyler. What's the latest on Keona Wilhite, the defensive lineman?
We just had that graphic about signing day on February 7th, and we're going to have a live show. It does sound like Keona Wilhite will be trying to announce with us, and that's because he's one of the top available players, a coveted edge rusher from the desert down in South Point Catholic in Tucson, Arizona. Reopened his process because he was released from his letter of intent with Washington after the coaching change, has taken official visits to Michigan State and Nebraska recently, has also had in-home meetings and visits with coaches as they go out there to try to convince him to sign with the program that they coach. That's a photo that we're showing there, a tweet that I put out last week. Keona Wilhite at Nebraska in a snowy conditions, not used to it being from Tucson, Arizona, but he told me that the staff was able to kind of open up the logo and really carve out a path for the family to go out to the field and take photos. That's an official visit he took right on the heels of an official visit to Michigan State. Jonathan Smith, the new coach there, also went in home earlier this weekend. So a lot of things going on here down the stretch, but it does sound like it's going to be a National Signing Day decision for Keona Wilhite.
It sounds like he's already okay with the idea of going to a snowy place with the schools that he is interested in. But yeah, that is a really, really cool photo. Colin wants to know any big events coming up for high school prospects to attend. We just had the Battle Miami this past weekend. What's coming up next?
It's moving over to the Sin City, Battle Vegas. Football and the festivities there are going to obviously be in on the Super Bowl in mid-February. This is going to kick off a huge week in Las Vegas. It's another opportunity for us to start getting introduced and to get familiar with the 2025, 2026, 2027 prospects that we will be talking about on this show for the next 11 months leading up to National Signing Day. And one of the players that we spoke about last year a lot was CJ Carr, the Notre Dame quarterback signee who was tremendous all weekend there at Battle Vegas. This week, a player I'm interested to see is Madden Iamaleava, the younger brother of Nico Iamaleava. It sounds like Colorado and Miami are two schools that are pushing for him. But a big performance here at Battle Vegas could obviously catapult him into a big spring evaluation period.
I love it. Looking forward to hearing your reports from Vegas this weekend. Blair, thank you as always for all the great insight. Thank you for watching. Make sure that you hit that like button and, of course, subscribe to the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. A real quick shout out to our producer, Aaron. It is his birthday today. It's a big one. It ends in a 0. Just wanted to shout him out and give him a happy birthday. Thanks again for watching. For Blair Angulo, I'm Emily Proud, and this is the College Football Recruiting Show.